Hello and welcome to our second session. Today's session is titled Learning to Look, Reading Visual Holocaust Children's Literature. So let's start. So last week we explored the key elements of graphic novels and picture books to ensure that we have a shared knowledge base. Now today we're going to be moving on, and today's program, as you can see, really focuses on reading images. We're looking, noticing, seeing and extracting meaning, and how can we extract meaning. So I've tried to split today's session into two parts. So we'll start with the theory, and then we will explore some illustrations together, so to apply the theory. I think that always makes it a little bit more accessible. I'll then wrap up, and if you've got any questions this week, please just email me. I've also added a Dig Deeper activity, which I hope you'll enjoy, and here we go. Now, if you watched the trailer for this session, or the little teaser that I made for you for session 2, you will be familiar with this illustration. It is by Olivier Latique, and it is from the picture book The Little Boy's Star, written by Rachel Hausvater. Now, I asked you in the session teaser, what do you see? Now, perhaps you noticed the moon, you noticed the stars, you noticed that there are stars with 5 points and that there is a star with 6 points. Perhaps you also noticed the size of the shadow of the little boy, the positioning of the Star of David at the top of his head, and perhaps you also noticed how bright the moon is shining. Now, on the right side, I've added another illustration from the very same book. You will immediately recognize the little boy and his scarf, and perhaps you've actually seen this illustration. It is in your course book on page 18, or your course guide, on page 18. Now, here you can see the moon is not shining bright. The shadow of the little boy is very different, and the Star of David here is black. The entire illustration is two-tone, red and black, as opposed to the initial illustration, or the illustration much earlier on in the picture book, which you can see on the left side. So the question is, what does it mean? And perhaps you're wondering, why am I asking, what do you see and what does it mean? Well, we are working in this course with visual Holocaust children's literature, and we are looking at it as a teaching resource, especially to support global citizenship. So with that in mind, we as teachers, we need to be able to read both the text and the image and understand how they work. And I found a really good example to illustrate what I'm trying to say. So I came across an article by Patricia Murphy from 2009. I think it's a very exciting article. You can find the reference on the reference slide further back in this deck. It's a short article, quite practical, and it's US-based secondary education, and she writes in a nutshell. She writes about using picture books to engage children at secondary level. Now, I'd like to read you a paragraph from this article, if that's okay, because I think it just really illustrates so well this idea of using visual Holocaust children's literature in the classroom to support global citizenship education, to support language learning. Here goes. Patricia writes, imagine a group of 7th grade students, so that would be around 12 years old from what I understand, launching into a study of the Holocaust in US history. 4 to 6 children clustered around 22 books such as The Harmonica by Johnston, The Cats in Krasinski Square by Hess, Terrible Things by Bunting, The Butterfly by Polacco, and Rose Blanche by Innocenti. These 5 books, Patricia writes, depict events and stories of the Holocaust. Imagine the new vocabulary, the images and the new insights, and the significantly increased knowledge brought about by these picture books. Imagine the conversations, discussions, and interest in the lives of those characters living through what these children have just studied as real events in their history lessons. Compared to a textbook, These picture books can reveal the point of view of the author more directly, focus more sharply on an individual or a topic, and present specialized information that often gives readers a fuller understanding. These picture books contain intriguing illustrations, provide an array of art styles, and offer opportunities for aesthetic learning, and with the brevity of text, contain carefully chosen words. Now, that is the end of the paragraph that I wanted to read out to you. I hope you could follow. Now, what I really appreciate about this paragraph, or about what Murphy has written, is the focus on the conversations and the discussion and the interaction between language and them, so the brevity of the text and them exploring the different, what they see, the different art styles, what is represented, but the stories of people who have lived through what they have learned. Now, of course, to guide students through conversations and discussions and to support global citizenship education, the teacher, of course, needs to be able to read both text and image. So I hope that has clarified why I've been asking, what do you see and what does it mean? And we will explore today how to extract meaning, but I thought I just wanted to start off with this. I'd also like to go not a step further, but I'd also like to introduce you to somebody very important, and he is called Perry Nodelman. So here he is, Dr. Perry Nodelman, a retired professor from the University of Winnipeg and a very important scholar in the world of children's literature. He's really written some amazing work. He writes in his work on words and pictures that he believes children need to be educated on the underlying structures of how stories are told in words, in pictures, and in word and pictures. And I feel that once again highlights the need for us to really explore how we read them and how we extract meaning. He also writes that in his view, this involves developing a curious, a critical mindset, which is conscious of visuals having multiple meanings and teaching children, amongst other, about symbols, codes, relationships between pictures and words. I've underlined the last few sentences because all of these words that I've underlined are words which will come, which you will come across a few more times throughout this session. So here's a slide you might recognize from last session. We were talking about the blurred lines between graphic novels and picture books, and we were talking about the splash page. And I gave you this example of a graphic novel, which very much looks, certainly on the left, like a page from a picture book. And Daniel even, I think it was Daniel who asked, why is this even categorized as a graphic novel? So I was thinking then furthermore about what Nodelman said about being able to teach the structures, or as the teacher understanding the structure of word and picture, and also thinking about what Murphy said and about us as educators guiding discussions and conversations. So I thought it would be a good idea to use picture books as a stepping stone to illustrate the interaction between text and image, because I feel that if you know how to read it, how to read a page in a picture book, then you can also apply that to a graphic novel, especially those that have got the blurred lines and we have got splash pages, or we have got spreads and double spreads. So the next few pages, we are now going to start diving into the theory. So here goes. Okay, let's start with the theory. Now, I hope you're sitting comfortably. We've got a few slides of theory coming our way. I'm going to start with Nicola Jeva and Scott, two picture book scholars, very important. And in 2006, they published a book called How Picture Books Work. And in this book, they categorize picture books based on the interactions of text and image. And these categories are really important, and they are very well recognized. So I've listed them for you here underneath. Symmetrical, text and image convey the same information. Complementary, text and image complement each other. Enhancing and expanding, counterpointing, synleptic. And these last four offer multiple and diverse interpretations to the reader. What is interesting, I think, and I'll give you an example in a second, they have shown, based on their research, that these different categories of picture books will result in a more passive or a more active reader. And I think that is really interesting. So, for example, they say in symmetrical picture books, when you have got the text and the image conveying the same information, or in complementary picture books where the text and the image complement each other, the reader takes a more passive role. Can you imagine why? Think about the gutter last time where we had that gap. And I think the reason is, of course, that every gap has already been filled. So if you look at this image of the cover, 10 red apples, imagine the cover only had the tree, the title 10 red apples and the 10 red apples. Then you would see what the reader would see, 10 red apples, a tree, 10 red apples in them. So here we have got, if it was only the 10 apples, it would be, as we say, symmetrical, with the tree complementary a little bit more. But now you can see in this cover, we've also got a bit more going on. So we have got, I assume, the farmer and his wife. We've got some animals hiding behind the tree. He's raising his hat. So we've got a lot more going on. And I think that's what they are talking about when they're speaking about enhancing, expanding and counterpointing picture books. We have got multiple and diverse interpretations, and that's of course when the reader becomes much more active, because there are gaps, and then the mind will be stimulated and you start to question. And that is, of course, again going back to Nodelman, what he was looking at or mentioning, that we are there to stimulate this curious mindset. And that, of course, also is one of the thinking in this course, to stimulate critical thinking. Now, a few thoughts on extracting meaning. And that is really quite important. So I've got 2 or 3 slides on. So we've seen the interaction, text and image. We've seen what we see. The question is, what does it mean? Now, we've got a few thoughts here. There are a few people who've come up with some ways of extracting meaning. Sipe, from 1998, he uses basically what he does, actually. He doesn't really tell us how to extract meaning. But what he mentions is really quite interesting. He talks about the signs of text and image. So we're going into the field of semiotics, of signs. And he talks about the text in terms of the pictures and the pictures in terms of the text. And he compares it a little bit with oscillation, back and forth, where the intake of new information will change your thinking in order to adjust to the new information, and then you create more and more meanings. And you can see it goes back and forth. There's a student, she's created a nice little diagram to show how it goes back and forth. You see an image, you read the text, you have an idea, then you see a little bit more, and it stimulates more and further thoughts. And I think this is already, although it doesn't tell you how to extract meaning, it is already a step towards realizing how you are creating meaning between the pictures and the text. And of course it builds on also what Nikolajeva and Scott have said about the different interactions of text and image. Now, Serafini, he was a little bit more pragmatic, let me say it in this way. Frank Serafini, also very, very important scholar from the US. He, in 2009, wrote a chapter, I believe, in this book, Talking Beyond the Page. So he also draws on the semiotics and establishes 4 key aspects to be considered when you are interpreting images in a picture book. So the 4 that he identifies are the narrative process, who is doing what to whom or what. And that's quite interesting. He then imagines lines in order to establish relationships. We then have visual symbolism, and with that we are looking at the visual signs in the picture which express perhaps traditions or conventions. And I'm sure you can think of symbols which express traditions or conventions. I mean, you just need to think of big yearly celebrations. Then we move on to composition. And with that, we are looking at aspects such as salience through colors and contrast on positioning of the different elements that you can find on the illustration or that create the image. Perspective, that's really interesting. Perspective, we are looking at the distance, and that can represent strength and power. Very important. We will be getting back to distance. Right, we have arrived at Jane Doonan. So Jane Doonan, I'm a really great fan of her work. This book, I think it's from 1993. Very accessible, easy read. So if you're interested, do see if you can get your hands on this copy. Now, Doonan describes the journey which occurs when reading the two modes of text and image in her approach, when in this book looking at pictures in picture books. Now, she believes, and I really appreciate what she writes here, that reading picture books comprises, as you can imagine, words and pictures. You gathered that much. And in her view, it means navigating reading words, which might be a familiar process. And I think we can all agree with that we are very familiar with reading words. And in her view, it also means navigating reading pictures, which in contrast might be familiar territory. And I must agree with her on that because, I was still in teacher education until very recently in the Netherlands. And I know this book is from 1993 and this comment goes back, quite a few years. But to this day, visual literacy does not really have a very prominent place in teacher education, and often it's not very taught if it is taught at all. So Doonan acknowledges, basically, she doesn't center on the value of pictures as a tool to support language and literacy development, but she believes that pictures allow the picture book to become an object of art. And this links to the aesthetic side, something I'd mentioned in a previous slide. Now, her focus lies on offering insights to help interpret what the illustrator has created in order to develop what she calls an aesthetic attitude to reading picture books. It means that you as the reader can go beyond the literal because, for example, you understand how shapes, lines and colors can perhaps express emotion and ideas. You are aware of composition, you are aware of the process, as Serafini mentioned, who is doing what. And she says as well, this aesthetic experience enables the reader to be stimulated by the pictures, which in return helps to shape ideas and create something that is the reader's own. And again, we're going a little bit in this aspect of oscillation. So we're looking at the pictures and the text and creating and shaping new ideas with all the new information that we acquire. Now, she also mentions that this approach to reading, of course, we are back on the curiosity, and that can also stimulate and satisfy a reader's curiosity. Now, Doonan is again a little bit like Serafini, quite pragmatic, and she offers a two-step approach. Now, this is what we have. She separates or divides looking at pictures in picture books into two key steps. First, looking in general. Develop an understanding for the key features, composition, colors, shapes, and lines. And then we look at more in context. And that means we are looking at it several times, reading it, dissecting the language a little bit and the pictures. And of course, if you're within the field of language learning, that's also an important aspect. And it also connects to what we will be doing next week, as in framing the narrative. And she really focuses on identifying what is on the page. So working and looking at pictures in picture books by Doonan. Now, let's move on. Now, on the next two slides, I'm going to be introducing work, Codes and Principles by Bang and by Möbius to extract meaning from picture books, to read the pictures in picture books. I've ummed and ahed a little bit if I should include their work, because it's quite technical, and this session today is already quite full, and I don't want you to get bored. So I'm just going to add a little bit as something as a disclaimer. So I've decided to include them just to ensure that my session is comprehensive. But also, I think what one should be really aware of is that these codes and principles, they're not meant to be to really kill the joy of reading or of reading pictures and graphic novels, and they are just a way of stimulating you, inviting you to explore and to have a richer and deeper interpretation. And these codes and principles, they're a little bit of a toolkit, and they just offer you, just greater insights on how to read pictures and support your comprehension of pictures and thus support your teaching. So just, I hope it's okay, just enjoy the ride and take what you can from it. So the 10 Principles by Molly Bang, I've listed them for you in the red box on the right, and on the left you've got the cover of the book. So that's her work from 1991. Picture this, how pictures work. I hope you enjoy hearing about it. I'm going to talk you through the different principles very briefly. I think her work is quite incredible, and as I said, I hope you'll enjoy hearing about it or learning about it. If this is new to you, you might actually recognize some of the things that she says, because it aligns a little bit with what we learned about the different panels and the arrangements in graphic novels last week. Now, Bang focuses on the emotional meaning conveyed in the picture, and in this book, Picture This, she uses a fairy tale to demonstrate how different arrangements and structures, shapes and colors can create emotionally visual statements. Now, she starts by saying that flat and horizontal shapes, they create a sense of stability and calm. In contrast to vertical shapes, they create excitement and activity because they're trying to reach other heights. She also discusses the diagonal shapes and uses the triangle to illustrate how that can influence a sense of stability and movement. Now, she also looks at the upper and the lower half of the page. Now, she believes that the upper half expresses freedom and happiness, whereas the lower half of the page refers to sadness and threat. Now, the next two principles, where are we? Yes, we are looking at 6 and 7. So we're talking about, she talks about the page, the edges and the corners. And here she explains that the center of the page really commands the most attention, and that the closeness of the object to the corner of the edge will determine the level of tension. So the closer the object is to the edge of the corner, the higher the tension. Now we're looking at 8, which is the background, and she says a lighter background adds a feeling of safety, as opposed to the dark background, which is associated with difficulties of seeing in the dark. Now remember what we saw, the two illustrations that I showed you from the little boy star right at the start. Remember the background. Now, principle 9, we focus on shape. And here round shapes give a feeling of security. They are enclosed, they're protected. Whereas pointy shapes, they're associated with items that can cut and hurt, such as knives. And finally, we have arrived at strength, and how the feeling of strength increases with the size of the object. Voila, the 10 Principles by Molly Bang. I hope you've enjoyed hearing what she had to say. And we will move on to Möbius. Now, Möbius, like Bang, also very structured. Unlike Bang, he does not have 10, he has only got 5, which I have also listed for you here. Now, I think Yeah, position size, diminishing returns. I think the position and the size is something we've just heard also by Bang. Now, diminishing returns. He says, for example, that the position refers to the location of the main character on the right or the left page of a double spread. The height, of course, of the character indicates power and status, and the frequency with which the character appears on the page implies the level of control, and that's what he refers to as diminishing returns. The more often the character appears, the less control it has. He also looks at the code of perspective, which includes elements such as horizon in the picture and general expressions of depth. And he says, for example, that the absence of a horizon indicates danger. Characters in two-dimensional spaces offer less room for imagination compared to the ones in three-dimensional spaces. He also looks at the word, the code of framing the illustration, which offers the reader either a limited glimpse or the total experience. And you remember when we spoke about the pictures where the color goes all the way out. There is no frame around it, so that you feel immersed, and that is the total experience. Speaking about lines, yes, so the fourth code, he reflects as well the force of the character. He says, for example, that thin lines indicate mobility, jagged lines arranged in sharp angles, they also complement emotional upset, and little scrawly lines, they mean like there's lots of energy, nervousness. And the fifth code, now this is the code of color. And here Möbius believes that there is a shift that takes place from a focus on what a specific color in generally is associated with outside of the text to the statement a color can make within the text. And I will look at color in a second. But I think here what I have got for you, I'll leave this up for a second to let you read. The Open University in England has been really quite good. They have basically taken his codes and explained a little bit more. I mean, I think it's pretty much what I've said, but you've got a few more questions, guiding questions to read through these codes by Möbius. Right. Let me move on from Möbius. But you can see there's a little bit of overlap with the work of Bang, and also all together it does, I hope you can see how it's all starting to tie in. Now, on the same page where I found this lovely overview by the Open University of the 5 codes of Möbius and their self-guiding questions, I found this task for students which I thought I would share with you. It was a task asking students to look at this illustration by Brown, an illustration from Hansel and Gretel, a fairy tale I'm sure you're all very well familiar with, and apply the 5 codes of Möbius. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. But on the other hand, I was also a little bit skeptical, because I thought, oh, that's quite a challenge, isn't it? Because it's not that easy. And I did there again, I agree with Dunen that you are navigating a little bit unfamiliar territory. It doesn't, it takes a lot of practice to read illustrations, and also to be certain that what you read or what you see is also a correct interpretation. And then there's always new insights, because again, then this process of oscillation starts. And so I was a little bit skeptical, and I was actually quite delighted to see that I'm not the only one who was a little bit skeptical. Here is a quote by Martin Salisbury. I used his work in our first session when we were talking about blurred lines. He, together with Morag, wrote the book on the art of visual storytelling. So he mentions or expresses his skepticism of this kind of visual analysis of children's picture books. And he states that he feels that it's academic interest which is driving this kind of analysis, an academic interest in the image, driven because it is of the educational role is of interest, rather than looking at the children's book and understanding it as a form of art, or the illustrations as art. And he says in his quote, Rather than looking for non-visual meanings behind the pictures, he comments that in many cases, very often the meaning simply is the pictures. And I thought that was a really reassuring quote, because it's what I said right at the start. Finding out, discovering the codes, the principles, how to extract meaning by different ways of looking. This is only is there to offer you a toolkit, enrichment, so that when you are in the situation of working with visual literature, visual Holocaust literature, as we are doing in this course, and you are thinking about guiding discussions, creating questions, preparing your lessons, you have just more insights. And that is basically it, and that there should also just be a degree of enjoyment of looking at the illustrations. So I will let you consider, have a look at this image and think about the position and the size and the composition and the perspective, and wonder about the shadow in the back and what that could mean. And however, one thing I would like to look at now, and that is something we haven't really discussed so far, and that refers to the aspect of color. And I think the colors here are quite interesting in this picture book, so I'm going to use this as a stepping stone to get to my next slide. We can see lots of muted colors. However, the lady is all in black. I think muted is not even, it's a little bit boring, the colours, aren't they? This kind of beigey, yellowy, but yeah, we will see. But with this, I am going to go back into the world of graphic novels, and I'm going to continue a little on the aspect of colour and sometimes lack of colour, and that is going to be my cue to go to the next slide. And here is Mouse. Many of you indicated that you had heard of Mouse. Some of you have read it. If you've read it, you will know inside it's black and white. The cover is in color. Now, Spiegelman uses textures and shading in order to achieve this perception of depth of the character. And the color, as I said, is only on the cover. Now, Art Spiegelman says that by not using color, he allows the reader to interpret the story of his father's survival on their own, with no influence from color. And you might think, no influence from color. And I think this is very interesting, because this actually connects to the fifth code by Möbius, which we looked at, where Möbius was referring to the shift that can take place with color, with what you associate color with, and the meaning of color in the story or chosen by the illustrator. So if we look at the color that we have in Mouse, so right at the front, we have got Mouse in red. So I'm going to focus on the red. And here we've got different meanings. You might interpret red differently. I've got a few. So red generally danger, violence, blood. It's quite a visual. Red offers a visual contrast. From a political point of view, red was also used in Nazi symbolism, the red in the Nazi flag, and so that adds another level to the story. Also, perhaps I should mention it that red in Italy is the color of resistance, or was the color of resistance during World War II. Red also offers a kind of urgency. There is emotion connected to it, so emotional urgency perhaps, and it is generally considered that something is urgent and important when we use red. I mean, think about when you send a message of high importance, the exclamation mark is red. Okay, stay with me. We have made it to the last slide of theory, and this is our final slide on theory before we start exploring a few covers. So Kress and Van Leuven, and I really do need to mention them because their work, Color as a Semiotic Mode, Notes for a Grammar of Color, it's also work that Serafini drew on when it came to his framework for analyzing the illustrations, which I mentioned earlier on. Now, Kress and Van Leuven, they discuss whether color is a communicational resource in its own right, like language, like image, and music. So they, for example, they mention how color can represent unique identity. So think about flags and companies, can signal ranking, safety codes are also attached to various colors. They also mention how values in maps are attached to colors. So remember the blue in the water. They also symbolize ideas such as white for innocence, red for revolution. They also mention that colors can achieve interpersonal meaning and can thus impress, warm, relax, or energize. And color can also instigate action because people are impressed and they are relaxed and they feel energized. Now, what Kress and van Leuven also discuss, and this is quite interesting, is how individuals have got varying meanings attached to the same color. So, for example, and that is all based on personal association. And that is also, again, links to Möbius and the shift of focus when we're looking at color. For example, the association with colors such as yellow or green, you know, how do you see yellow or green, can be specific to a country, color, situation, or experience. Whereas, again, so well, I'll stop now, but you get the idea of how complex color is. And I think that is quite interesting. And perhaps that is also really that underlying thinking was Spiegelman's choice for black and white, or other artists choosing to draw in black and white. So, as I said, we have made it to the end of the theory. And so this was quite a theoretical discussion. I hope you are still with me. And this was all on extracting meaning. And it also really highlights the complexity of reading and understanding the relationship of text and image in picture books, but also to an extent in graphic novels, because we know we have these blurred lines. Now, the various elements of the picture book and the significance and the richness of both all the frameworks that you've heard and the approaches, I hope you see that that highlights the need for really a basic understanding how they work, so that you really can guide the learners. And I hope you've enjoyed this ride so far, and we shall move on. We've still got quite a few slides to cover, so here we go. Now, we are moving on in a much more relaxed way and in a lot less theoretical way. So, okay, the next few slides I have all titled, What Do You See? Stay curious. I hope you will enjoy them. I've got a number of covers for us just to enjoy looking at and exploring from a visual point of view. So let's see what we can read. Let's see what we can read. Here goes. Survivors of the Holocaust, graphic novel. I shared that last time. It's written predominantly for a younger audience. I think we can immediately see that. The choices of colors, the handwritten font, all you see very attractive for a younger learner, so 9+. We see 6 children. I'm sure you can see them as well. They all look different. Why do they all look different? Well, children are all different. I think it's also an interesting point because it really, thinking about how Jews were stereotyped, I think this is quite a good point to make them so very different. We have also got a skyline at the back, European architecture, I would say. We've got a very dark sky. Remember what we learned about the dark sky, the dark horizon. Interestingly enough, we don't have stars in the sky. We have dots. And on the word where we should have a dot, as in the survivor, we have a star. We have the Star of David. And the Star of David is enclosed in flames. And that, of course, here we're talking symbolism. So we have the Star of David and we have the flame. And the flame is a symbol of remembrance, eternal memory, represents the eternal memory of the millions of Jews who perished in the Holocaust, and reflects as well the tradition of lighting the memorial candle in remembrance of the ones who perished or deceased. I think, I think it's quite a good cover. I think it speaks to the audience they are aiming at. Interesting choices of colors. But right, I've got a few more pages of this graphic novel for you to have a look at. It says that it's 6 stories, and I have chosen Martin's story. Let's have a look. So here we can see we've got these horizontal large panels of what happens to Martin. It's quite a restricted color palette, isn't it? We also, again, remember what we said about the center of the page. So if you look at the left, we can very clearly see the swastika. We can see the red behind it. On the other page, what I think is quite interesting is that we have got speech bubbles because they have the line going down. And that's what we learned with speech bubbles, that we have a line. The thinking bubbles have no line. Yet there is actually, there are no words in it. There's just, not just, but there is the Star of David in the speech bubbles. And they mention that they were lucky because they remained together as a family. So it's interesting how they have just removed all the people in the final panel to highlight that they were staying together. More red. Also, if you see right at the top, they're moving out of a panel. And that's quite interesting. They're moving towards the edge, this blurred edge. So we're moving in. So again, we can immerse ourselves more into the picture. We have the use of the here as well. You can see the top panel on the right. Again, we're moving out of the panel. We discussed that as well. And here we have got the voice, the sound effect, which is so typical for graphic novels. I'll let you have a little bit of a look. And here you can also see, remember what we were just talking about, the size and the power relationship. And quite a bit of red. And again, you can see a very restricted color palette. Now, remember last time when we spoke about the back matter, and I mentioned that in visual Holocaust children's literature, the back matter was really quite important because often we had additional information. We might have a glossary, we might have notes from the author, extra information. And in this graphic novel, this really is the case. So we have got what happened next. So this is very interesting. So we've got the 6 characters, so you can see how they were depicted. And then we have got a little short summary of what happened to them. We all know they survived. And I think this is really very interesting because in our course guide, we try to do the same. We try to do what is before the Holocaust, then the Holocaust in the timeline section, and then after. And that, of course, all contributes to moving away of seeing the Jewish person who survived the Holocaust and who might have not survived the Holocaust as only, and I'm not liking saying the words only, as a victim. And I think that is very, very important. And if you read what we wrote at the start of, I believe it is part 2 in the course guide, we explain that a little bit more. This back matter also includes a timeline. A glossary, sorry, I'm on the glossary here. And it includes a timeline, a very nicely illustrated timeline, may I say. Oh, 2 more covers here. I really like this one. Now, the left one is very interesting. I don't know why I'm saying interesting so often, but I'm not sure what to say. But in any case, Benno and the Knight of Broken Glass. Again, I mentioned this one in our first session. I'm trying to recycle a few of the covers so you don't get overwhelmed with more and more new books. What do you notice? Do you notice that the glass is broken? This is about the event of the Kristallnacht. What do you notice where the cat is walking? There are no pieces of glass. I'll just leave that with you. The next cover, Nicky and Vera. Nicky and Vera is about the Kindertransport, story of Nicholas Winton. Again, a cover that I showed last time. We will be discussing this in greater detail in our book talk session. We see a girl holding a suitcase and a doll. What is very well done is in her you can see who she is. You can see the parents, you can see her home, you can see who she was before she arrived in England. She is standing at the station. We've got a train on the left, we have a train on the right, and in the far distance, now here you can see we have horizon. That means we have a future, we have hope, we have Big Ben, and that is where she arrived. The children on the Kindertransport arrived at Liverpool Street Station in England, and here we have Big Ben, and they were waiting to be picked up. And we have got here, we are totally embedded. So looking at Möbius's code of framing, there is no bleed. We are inside. Everything is unframed. The lines thin, expressing mobility. We have also got quite a few angles, which of course we know from Bang that expresses emotional upset. So we've also got, we have got quite a depth here. And right in the distance, I don't know if you've noticed, can you see this person? There is somebody here. And that, I can tell you, is the person who has come to collect Vera. Everything in blue. I'll leave that like this. Now, another few things. Again, this is one of the early picture books. I think 1981, if I'm not mistaken, 1982, Promise of a New Spring. Promise of a New Spring. What do you see? Spring. What does spring mean? Spring on the trees. Do you see any buds on these trees? They're quite warmly dressed, aren't they, the two? We see also a bit of snow. We see a bird. The back cover has got a picture. I didn't have the, I was away from my desk when I was preparing these slides, so I didn't have the back cover, but the back cover indicates this image. So we know there's an indication to concentration camp, Star of David. So the question is, promise of a new spring. So this really is, we'd need to investigate here the meaning of spring. I guess the blue is quite a fresh blue, isn't it? It is a spring reflecting blue, but the fact that the trees have got no buds and that we have so much snow still for spring, I find that is contradictory. And remember what we talked about, the different categories, the interaction of text and image. So this is an example. This is another picture book on the Kindertransport. It's a bilingual one. That we don't have many, but we have a few. Italian English, originally published, I think Italian only, by Barbara Vagnozzi. I'm a great fan of this book. I think it's an excellent publication. She has got a very interesting technique. She uses, I mentioned, I think in my first session, that some of the picture books on the Holocaust also include photos, archival material. And here she uses very much a collage style. So we've got her illustrations, but we have also got images inserted of original material. So we can see this is Lev, which means, the book is called Lev, but Lev also means heart in Hebrew. And Lev he loves collecting stamps, so you can see him at his table, and that is of when he is at home. And this is another example of a picture book which really very well shows how life was before the Holocaust. And so this is what Lev liked doing, collecting stamps. We then see the stamps moving, and there is movement to the right. He is on the left, so again we know something is coming. And we have got a picture in the right hand corner. So these little aspects all invite you to analyze this picture a little bit in greater detail. We can also see that he's slanted. We've got very fine lines. It's a very interesting publication. I have got to stop saying interesting. So I'd like to conclude this exploration of illustrations with, I guess, coming full circle. This is the illustration, is from the book where the illustration was taken for your teaser for this week's session, and The Little Boy Star by Rachel Hausvater and Latik. And I think this is an interesting illustration here. You can see the contrast of the words and the illustrations, because it is outside, it is very, very bright and light outside, but inside the house you can see where the little boy is hiding. So the story goes that it's actually based on her father's life story, how he survived the Holocaust in Paris, being hidden. And in this book you will see how he is taken in by a stranger and hidden in a house. And you can see that in the house it is very dark, and the tree in front, the size is very powerful. We can see rows and rows of trees and no stars, so a very, very clear sky. And but we do have we have some depth, but not much. It's mainly rows of trees, so you could wonder, are these obstacles? Do these express the danger, the fear he is living with? And one of these picture book types that Nicola Jeva and Scott expressed or explained, where the text and the illustration don't match. So we have made it to the end. We are nearly at the end of our slides. So well done for staying with me. I hope you've managed, and fear not if you've taken some breaks in between. That's all fine. It's an asynchronous session. So I just hope you've made it with me and you're with me on these final slides. So today we looked at approaches and principles to reading images, to extracting meaning. We also looked at, well, we also were a bit critical about to what extent do we need to really analyze images, and looking at the aspect of an educator or a teacher being enriched by knowing how to read images. Of course, all towards this one objective of being able to guide and educate children in the classroom, and I guess also yourself. Next session, we have got an asynchronous lecture, and we have got a synchronous book talk. So I will be having the slides back again with a voiceover for you ready for next week, and we will be talking about the Kindertransport in the book talk. That will be our first book talk session. That is quite a relaxed and informative setting, as I explained. So I hope to see many of you on Tuesday the 29th at our usual time. Let me go on. The portfolio, as you know, for this session, please look at the course guide. And I've had a few emails regarding the graded and non-graded coursework. I will be addressing those questions and getting back to you towards the end of the week. Dig deeper. We've got a final slide which comes after the references. Yes, and of course, please email me if you have any questions. Dig deeper. I hope you enjoy this. This is an exhibition currently running at the Museum of Jewish Heritage in New York. It is called Courage to Act, Rescue in Denmark. It's very much based on visual storytelling, an illustrator working, interpreting the stories. And I think you will very much enjoy watching the little video, which tells more about the exhibition, but most importantly, it also shares the voices of children who have contributed to this exhibition, and I think you will enjoy hearing from them, because of course this course is also about visual Holocaust children's literature in the classroom and how children see and think about it. So with that, we have made it to the end. Thank you very much, and I will see you next week. Bye.